I'm David Travis and this is the UX Tea Break, and in this video I look at what makes a good usability test. So this question comes from Ratul, and Ratul has said, you've spoken before about how a non-specialist can judge the quality of user research done in discovery, but how do you decide if a usability test has been run the right way? So Ratul's referring back to a video I did a while back looking at what makes good discovery research. I'll put a link in the video here about that. And that particular video was really aimed at non-user researchers. I think it was a product owner who asked the question. It was really to work out, well, how can someone like that judge whether or not discovery research is any good? Let me quickly distinguish between discovery research and usability testing. So with discovery research, that's stuff that you do early on when you're trying to work out what are the user needs for this thing that we're developing. And the purpose of that is to make sure you design the right thing. With a usability test, you've already done that research and you're fairly sure that you're designing the right kind of thing, and what you have is a prototype or a system to put in front of users. But if we ask that same question, how could a non-specialist judge whether or not a usability test is any good? I think there are three criteria that you could use. So the first one would be to look at the users that have been involved in the usability test. So if it's a good usability test, you'll obviously be involving the users that will actually be using the system in the real world. So for example, if your system that you're developing is aimed at air traffic controllers, the people that take part in your usability test should be air traffic controllers, and not just any kind of air traffic controller, but the kind that will be using your specific system as well. Now, because we use small samples in a usability test, I wouldn't recommend that you go the full hog and try and get a balanced sample. You'd be on a fool's errand if you try that. But at least make sure that these are the type of people that will actually be using this system in the real world. So that's the first thing to look for. Make sure the right users have been involved. When you've done that, the second thing to look at are the tasks that people are being asked to do. Because fundamentally, a usability test is all about tasks. Tasks are the beating heart of a usability test. It's a task-oriented technique. We give people tasks to do, which are a bit like missions they need to solve with the system, problems that they need to use the system to come to some resolution, problems they need to solve with this thing we've given them. So they're very task-oriented. However, sometimes in usability tests, I've seen very poor tasks used. For example, a task like log into the system, which isn't a task that anyone really wants to do. Similarly, another task I've seen before is have a look at the home page and see if it's a brand you want to be associated with. Seriously, I've seen people use that in a usability test. The reason they're not real tasks is they're not things real people would ever want to do with the system. Nobody wants to look at a web page and see if it's a brand they want to be associated with. Nobody wants to log into a system. What they're trying to do is achieve some overall goal. And there's a trick here you can use to check if a task is any good. Would a user use that task in completion of this sentence? I'm using this system because I want to. So nobody would say, I'm using this system because I want to log in. Nobody would say, I'm using this system because I want to see if it's a brand I want to be associated with. But they might say, I'm using this system because I want to apply for a provisional driving license. Or they might say, I'm using this system because I want to find a pair of size 9 boots for working down the allotment. Those things are real tasks that people would do with different applications, and your tasks in the usability test should be the same. So look at the tasks that are being used, and are they real tasks that real users will want to do? And then the third criteria is to do with the approach you use. So with a formative usability test, you're after finding usability problems with the system. 90% of the usability tests that are run are of the formative type. The other type is summative, where you're actually measuring usability. But here I'm talking about the formative type of test. And with those, there's a particular technique that's used called thinking aloud. We ask participants to think aloud as they're doing these tasks. And that's how we can get some insight into what they're thinking. But thinking aloud isn't just talking, and it's definitely not an interview with the moderator. Sometimes in usability tests, I've seen moderators say to participants things like, do you like this screen? Or would you prefer the navigation on the right or the left of the screen? Those questions are unhelpful in a usability test. What we're interested in instead is what users are actually trying to do. And to get those insights, we want them to think aloud about what they're doing. So the moderator should be asking questions like, what are you thinking right now? What's going through your head? What are you trying to do here? Or even, before you click on that link, what would you expect to see on the next screen? All of those are kind of acceptable, but we don't want to be asking people about what they like and what they prefer. So if your usability test that you're trying to check if it's any good, if it hits those 3 criteria, the right kind of users, doing the right kind of tasks, using the right kind of thinking aloud method, it's going to be hard to have ended up with a usability test that's bad. At least you're going to get some good data from it. Now, there's a lot more to running a good usability test than just having those 3 criteria. But for me, they would be the litmus test of whether a usability test was any good. Well, I hope you found that useful. If you did, please post a comment below. And if you have any other questions you'd like me to answer in these tea break videos, please post one of those below as well.